What's up, folks? It is Dr. Remy LeBeau, and I'm coming at you once again from the X Lair to provide you my reaction to The Dark Tower. I just saw it. I have grown up on this stuff. Like, I started reading Stephen King when I was really young. I remember I went to a garage sale and they had Night Shift, which is a collection of short stories that includes The Mist, I believe. And it was another one. I think it was The Dead Zone. Yeah. And then after that, I was hooked, and I remember they had this Stephen King Book of the Month Club. Every month they would send you a hardcover. So, like, I got all of them. I got The Shining, I got Misery, I got Salem's Lot, all of them. And I read them as they arrived. And then at one point I discovered The Dark Tower. At the time I discovered it, there were only two, I think. There was the first one, The Dark Tower, The Last Gunslinger, and The Drawing of the Three, which is the second book. And then I think The Wastelands is the third one. That one actually came out after I started reading. Okay, so that one came out afterwards, and then years later, we got Wizard and Glass, which is the fourth one, which is sort of like a prequel, which is apparently what the TV series that I'll mention in a second is going to be based on, if they indeed move forward with it. And then after that, there was a huge break. And during that break, Stephen King actually almost died at one point. And then he survived, and fortunately he realized he needed to finish the story, and so he whipped out 3 books really quick. I think The Wolves of the Kala was the first one, The Song of Susanna was the second one, and then finally we got The Dark Tower. So this is the last book in the series. It's number 7. It was released in 2004. 2004 it was released, so it's been 13 years since Stephen King finally finished his story, and I remember just being very satisfied overall with the entire thing, which is not how I felt about the film. So if I were to describe this film in one word, it would be underwhelming. It was as underwhelming as you can imagine. And I think the main problem with it was a lack of imagination. And that may or may not have been a result of like a lack of a huge budget. But it also may not be, because I've seen, and we've all seen, movies where they have, you know, a small budget, but they're able to be very creative with what they have to work with, and it winds up turning into something captivating. That did not happen here. The only interesting elements of the film, like imaginative elements, were the elements that are inherent to the Dark Tower story. Like all the sort of multiple world lore, you know, where there's like alternate dimensions and they each have kind of their own history. And like the main world that that the story takes place in, Midworld, has a sort of a steampunkish type quality where they have like really old decaying technology that's actually futuristic and more advanced than anything we've ever seen. That was in the movie. There were a lot of other things that were sort of meant to, in the stories, kind of again elevate the otherworldliness of the Dark Tower series. That existed in this film, but it all felt very like commonplace. Everything felt very conventional. Nothing felt magical. Like there was no magic to it. It was just very like cookie cutter by the book. Okay, we've got to translate these sort of fantastical elements into this movie. And it was just exactly what you would expect as a reflection of things that we've already seen in countless films Just the technology, the production design overall, nothing was really interesting. The only great parts about the movie, obviously, are Idris Elba as Roland Deschain. He actually played a great Roland Deschain. I thought he was a great gunslinger, and I think had the movie around him been better, he would have been fantastic. And Matthew McConaughey as well. Like, he played a great Walter, who ultimately, and this is a big spoiler, but I mean, if you understand the Dark Tower for what it is, you understand that it is sort of the nexus of all of Stephen King's stories, and that some of the main villains from other stories actually wind up being a part of this. One of them being the main villain from The Stand. This is my copy of The Stand. It's the only actual book I still have from my childhood. I used to carry it around with me. I think as sort of a symbol of my great sort of accomplishment of getting through this book. Here's a receipt from some sort of Mexican grill from 1995. Wow, fascinating. Anyway, so yeah, this is like in this book, this great villain, Randall Flagg, like, is probably the most menacing villain that you've ever imagined, and then at one point in the series, in the Dark Tower series, it's revealed that the villain of the Dark Tower series is actually also the villain of The Stand. It's like, whoa, mind blown, right? Like, the stories connect, the worlds connect. There's a shared universe, as it were, of King's stories, and that was just so exciting. I remember when I found out. I think we found out in Wizard and Glass. It was fucking mind blowing, and it made me really excited, and I loved everything that came afterward, and it was all really enjoyable. Anyway, so the Randall Flagg, Matthew McConaughey as Randall Flagg, really good. I believed him. I believed that he was this character in his performance. But just like in the way that he was presented, in the way that everything was presented, it was just so like boring. Like, this is fucking the biggest threat to the fucking universe, to multiple fucking dimensions. Like, and he just looks like some guy, Matthew McConaughey, dressed in black. It's like, no. We shouldn't see him for a long time. And when we do see him, he should be in shadow. And it should always be fucking creepy. Him in the fucking frame should be affecting the world around him. Like, he should bring darkness with him. Like, it should be a very expressionistic sort of presentation where it's like the world around him reflects the evil that is inside of him, and we didn't get any of that. There was no style to the film, the kind of style that you need to really sell this kind of world and material, because if you do, people are gonna like it and they're gonna want more. But this is a very sort of classic sort of Sony approach to making a movie. Like, we own a property. The property can make us money. Let's make it like robots would make it. Translate it in a way that fits a formula that's supposed to make us money. It's like, no, this is a very specific type of story. It's very imaginative, and you have to be very imaginative in your translation of it, not just in trying to capture the story itself, but like in the way that you represent the world via the filmic medium, via film, via the editing, via the cinematography. The cinematography in this movie was boring as fuck. It was like, okay, here's like some people in New York. It just looks like New York. Okay, here's some people in fucking the desert. It just looks like a desert. Here's some people in a fucking in a creepy sort of a jungle or forest in the middle of the night. It just, you can barely see anything. There's nothing otherworldly about it. There's nothing like bigger than life about it. Like, okay, so here's just like one. So every book had like these really cool illustrations to them, and the illustrations, I think, if somebody had taken those as sort of the inspiration for the look of the film, I think would have served the film better. This is just a very simple sort of drawing of like Roland and Jake kind of in a cave or like somewhere in the desert on their way to the Dark Tower, and it's like, and there's style to it, there's like a certain color hue over the whole thing, and then there's like like this like beam of light here. It's like there's like layers of intrigue to the presentation of the image. There's stuff in the foreground, middle ground, background, all kind of creating a reality that is appealing and intriguing to the eye. Nothing like that in this film. Everything very conventional. There was a scene at night where this monster attacks in the forest, and you can barely see the monster. A lot of that sort of like quick cut action where it's like you don't really understand what's happening sometimes. Like you can't really place the geography, the spatial relations of the scene. Like you don't really know where you are because you don't really understand what's happening because they don't want to spend the money to show you clearly what's happening. It's just really unfortunate because like there's so much magic in this tale, and you could really use this first film to really pull people in, but instead they sort of try to condense a lot of the story into one story and then kind of ended it, and it was like, that's it? That's all? Like there were all these interesting elements everywhere, but none of them implied more than what we saw. Like there wasn't like a sort of a series of story beats that even though play out, like kind of leave it open for like a bigger tale, like there was nothing like that. And I will now at this point I'll start with the spoiling. Okay, so like the fact that we were sort of introduced, well, the story initially was about Jake Chambers, and like kind of it was from his point of view, and like kind of him discovering like that what he is seeing in his mind is part of this other world, and like us following his journey into that other world. I like that because I think it's a good way to kind of go into this world. But the kid himself was not that charismatic, like there wasn't much to the kid, who's the main character for like the first, 10th of the film, and it's like that's not gonna captivate me nor the general audience. The kind of his journey into Midworld and once we got there, it was like I said earlier, it was all very underwhelming. There were a couple of moments, like the moment in the house where like the house sort of attacked him. That was interesting-ish, but still there was a lot of kind of that I don't really know what's happening sometimes in like the action sequence that occurred. Where just there it's just like stuff happening just to kind of elongate the sequence, but they didn't think it out. They didn't spend the money to make it look the way it should have. Anyway, it was just all very choppy and fast. But regardless of what I'm saying now, I don't actually mean the movie was badly made, because it wasn't. It was made... It was the way it was made overall was fine. It wasn't extraordinary, but it wasn't like terrible where like like in X-Men 3 where they're on the Golden Gate Bridge and it's day, and then all of a sudden they get to Alcatraz and it's night. Like shit like that did not happen in this movie. So at least that was fine. But like I said, like everything was very sort of banal, very commonplace, not in any way like up to the level that you would expect from like the level of fantastic materials that the movie's based on and is supposed to sort of draw us into for more than just an hour and a half. I just didn't have any of that. As a book reader, obviously I did enjoy probably more than the average person would, because there's a lot of sort of that referencing of things that I'm familiar with that kind of it gave me that nostalgic joy. It's memberries. They had a lot of memories, memberries, from South Park last season, where they had the little blueberries that reminded you of all the things that you love. The memories. Remember Star Wars? Remember AT-ATs? Anyway, watch South Park last season. Hilarious. Everything with the memories, fucking hilarious. Anyway, there was a lot of that for me, but like if I had never read the books and I watched this movie, I would think it was the most uninteresting and just trite tale of like of just a very generic Hollywood film that like has no magic, kind of does what basically every other generic film has ever done. Is not imaginative, nothing. Like there's nothing about it that would make me say that was a fucking special experience. So I mean, that's ultimately it. Like the whole thing is just kind of, it's underwhelming. They did not spend enough money on it. There's no magic. And it's sad, it's really sad. Yeah, that's it's just disappointing, but like it's ultimately not, because these books still exist, folks. Like if you are interested in the Dark Tower, like go back and read them. They're fucking worth it. They're really enjoyable. And I would read The Stand as well, because it's a fucking great book. Obviously, all of them will take you forever to read, but you've got some time. You ain't dying tomorrow, folks. Anyway, yeah, those are my thoughts. I'm not very excited about this situation. Like I said, I don't hate it, but like I'm a Blu-ray buyer of basically everything that I love. Like I have all the Marvel films, all the Game of Thrones, all the Walking Dead, Star Treks, Harry Potters, everything that's good. I get. I have all the alien stuff, all the a lot of horror stuff, the Nightmare on Elm Street, like all the things that have some sort of connection to my past, or like currently are being well produced and are worth having. I have those. So this is the sort of thing that I would normally buy, but I don't think I'm going to get this. I don't think I want to watch it again, unless there's a miracle and they actually decide they're going to make more and they're actually going to tell better stories in better ways with higher production value and actual imagination behind it. Then I don't really want to see more of this. And I'll just, if I ever want to revisit this story, I'm just going to go back to the books, and it's really sad, but that's just the way it is. Anyway. This is my very underwhelming review of a very underwhelming movie. And that's that. Thanks for checking out my channel. Thanks for checking out my content. If you haven't already done so, you can subscribe. You can subscribe down there. And as always, I want to remind you, if you haven't already, you should put an X in the box, because, folks, if you haven't already put an X in that box, then you've forgotten the face of your father. Take care. Bye-bye.